All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling a text that's become, frankly, a phenomenon in the world of personal and professional effectiveness. It's a book that challenges pretty much everything we think we know about what it takes to be successful and happy, offering a completely different perspective.
That's right. We're doing a deep dive into excerpts from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the longevity and impact of this book aren't accidental.
No.
It speaks to some really deep, sometimes painful issues that people face, issues that quick fixes just can't touch.
Absolutely. And the author brings so much to it, drawing from his own experiences, years in leadership development, teaching, and crucially, confronting personal challenges, even within his own family dynamics.
Yeah, like struggles with one of his sons, right?
Exactly. It gives the insights a raw personal feel while still being incredibly universal, I think.
Precisely. So our mission in this deep dive is to really get to the heart of these excerpts. We want to understand the core ideas, see why they're so powerful, and how they ask us to fundamentally rethink our approach to effectiveness and happiness.
It lays out a whole framework.
A complete framework, yes.
And the book gets right to it, doesn't it? Addressing those core problems we mentioned, that feeling of unease, even when things look good on the outside, relationships that are strained.
Teams that lack loyalty, just feeling totally overwhelmed, yeah.
These aren't things you could just fix with a simple trick, are they?
No, and the book argues these are chronic conditions. They stem from a deeper issue.
Okay.
And the solutions have to be based on enduring principles, not just, temporary hacks or techniques.
Right, like not just treating the symptom.
Exactly. And for you, the listener, the value here is getting a concentrated look at those underlying issues. It offers a completely different lens, what the author calls a new level of thinking, for approaching these common frustrations. The goal isn't just to feel better for a moment, but to build something that lasts.
Something sustainable.
So, how about we start by unpacking that core tension the book introduces? This idea of different ethics.
Okay, let's unpack this. The author talks about having this significant personal realization, an aha moment.
Yeah.
Noticing a gap between what he knew intuitively to be true, things he was taught growing up, his inner values, and the dominant philosophies around him that promised quick results.
Yes, it was the subtle, pervasive discrepancy he noticed. He labels these popular, often results-oriented philosophies the personality ethic.
Personality ethic, okay.
This is where you find things like techniques for influencing others, communication skills training, positive thinking strategies, image management, that kind of thing.
And he's not saying those are useless, right?
Yeah.
I mean, communication skills are important.
Not at all. He acknowledges they can be important, beneficial, even essential in some interactions, but he calls them secondary traits.
Secondary traits.
They're like the icing on the cake, but they aren't the cake itself.
Got it. And the character ethic is the cake.
Exactly. This is the foundation. It focuses on fundamental character strength. Things like integrity, honesty, courage, kindness, basic goodness. These are the primary traits.
Primary versus secondary.
Okay.
And the contrast he draws is really sharp.
It is.
You might be a master of communication, know every trick in the book to charm or persuade, plaster a positive attitude on everything. But if you lack that core integrity, if there's duplicity, it just falls apart eventually, doesn't it?
Completely. It breeds distrust, and trust is the bedrock of any lasting success, particularly in relationships. The source says trying to use personality techniques without character is often perceived as manipulative. It doesn't matter how well-intentioned you are or how smooth your words are. If there's no trust, there's no foundation. Basic goodness. Those primary traits, they give life to technique.
Well, cramming for a test.
Exactly like that. It's like cramming for a test to get a good grade versus actually studying and mastering the material. You might pass the test with cramming, achieve that secondary greatness of a good score.
Yeah, you got the A.
But you haven't achieved the primary greatness of true understanding, and it won't serve you in the long run. You haven't actually learned it.
That makes so much sense. It's trying to get the outcome without doing the fundamental work, like farming, maybe?
The law of the harvest. Yes. The author uses that analogy powerfully.
Right.
You can't skip planting and cultivating all spring and summer and then expect a harvest in the fall just by trying harder on the last day or using fancy techniques. It's a natural system.
You reap what you sow.
You reap what you sow.
Simple as that.
And that applies directly to human relationships and effectiveness. You can use charm or pretense for a brief interaction, maybe make a good first impression.
Sure.
But in any long-term relationship, professional or personal, Challenges expose true motives, and if that character foundation isn't there,
It crumbles. The relationship suffers or fails. Which brings us to primary versus secondary greatness. Secondary is that social recognition, being seen as talented or successful in the public eye. But primary greatness,
for the goodness of your character, who you really are.
and the source points out that many people who have achieved great secondary greatness lack primary goodness.
Yeah.
And that lack will show up eventually.
Oh, it always does, especially in their closest relationships with a spouse, a child, a close colleague.
Yeah. Your character, who you truly are, communicates far more loudly than anything you say or do. There's that Emerson quote.
What you are shouts so loudly in my ears that I cannot hear what you say. It captures this perfectly.
It really does. Even if you're not the most articulate person, your character will build trust or destroy it.
Right. William George Jordan described it as the silent, unconscious, unseen influence of one's life, the constant radiation of who you really are, not just the persona you present.
Wow. So thinking about you, the listener, if you're putting in effort, using techniques, trying to communicate well, but your relationships or professional endeavors feel hollow or keep hitting walls, maybe the focus has been too much on those secondary traits, neglecting the primary.
That's a fundamental shift, isn't it? It requires looking inward first.
It really is. And that shift in focus is tied directly to how we see the world, to the power of paradigms.
Paradigms. Yeah, let's talk about those.
It sounds like a technical term,
Yeah.
but the book uses this incredibly simple and relatable analogy.
It defines a paradigm as a model, a theory, a perception, an assumption, a frame of reference, basically, the way you see or understand the world.
How you interpret everything.
Exactly. And the simple analogy it uses is a map. Your paradigm is your map of the world.
Ah, the map analogy. This really helps illustrate the point. The map isn't the territory.
Exactly. Imagine you're trying to navigate downtown Chicago, but you're using a map of Detroit. You can try harder, increase your speed, double your efforts, changing your behavior. You could try to have a positive attitude, think happy thoughts about your destination despite being lost, changing your attitude.
But you'd still be completely lost. Just maybe lost faster or lost with a smile on your face.
Precisely. The fundamental problem isn't your behavior or your attitude in that situation. It's the map, the paradigm.
The map is wrong.
The map is wrong. The source emphasizes that the more our paradigms, our maps, align with natural laws and principles, the more accurate and functional they are. Having the correct map, the correct paradigm, influences your effectiveness infinitely more than just trying to change your behavior or attitude on their own.
So the personality ethic, focusing just on techniques and outward appearances, that's essentially a wrong map if your goal is deep effectiveness and lasting relationships.
It's like trying to get to Chicago with a Detroit map. It's symbol without substance. The source even references Erich Fromm's description of individuals acting like automatons, lacking spontaneity, individuality, with synthetic smiles and meaningless chatter, experiencing a pervasive, dull despair.
Gosh.
He suggests this widespread condition might be a result of the prevalent incorrect paradigms people hold about life and success, these superficial maps.
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
For you, the listener, if you feel like you're expending a lot of energy trying different approaches, maybe reading other self-help books focused on techniques, but you're not getting the results you deeply desire, perhaps the issue isn't your effort, but the map you're using. Maybe your underlying understanding of the territory of human effectiveness and relationships is fundamentally off.
It's about checking your map first. And speaking of fundamental understandings, one that's crucial is the natural process of growth and change.
Growth is sequential.
Right.
You can't skip steps. It's obvious in physical development. A baby doesn't run before they can walk.
And they don't walk before they can crawl or sit up.
Right. Each step builds on the last, takes time, and is essential.
And the source argues the same natural sequential process applies to all forms of development, including emotional development, character growth, and building human relations.
But because it's not as visible as physical skills like playing a sport or a musical instrument, it's easier to pose or pretend you're at a certain level when you haven't actually put in the work to get there. You can kind of fake it for a bit.
You can try to fake it. But the danger of shortcuts is real. Attempting to bypass these natural sequential steps is contrary to nature and inevitably leads to disappointment and frustration.
Yeah. Like trying to play competitive tennis without practicing the basics.
Or pretending to be a concert pianist without putting in the thousands of hours. You just can't fake mastery of a natural process in the long run.
Progress really does happen one step at a time, that 1,000-mile journey.
Exactly. And sometimes the very first step is admitting you're at the beginning, acknowledging your ignorance. Thoreau's quote is insightful. How can we remember our ignorance, which our growth requires, when we are using our knowledge all of the time? We often feel we have to project competence.
Right, like we have to know it all already.
Which prevents us from admitting we don't know or aren't yet capable, which is precisely what's necessary for growth.
Like the anecdote about the father who knew intellectually he had a temper problem.
Yes.
But wouldn't take responsibility for his low emotional development level.
He knew what he should do intellectually, but he hadn't done the inner work, the sequential growth, to be capable of doing it consistently.
The being versus the knowing.
Right. To have effective relationships, you need the emotional strength required to truly listen, the patience, the openness, the genuine desire to understand. It's much easier to give advice, even good advice, from a low emotional level than to actually connect and understand from a mature one.
This shortcutting shows up a lot in organizations too, according to the source.
Oh, absolutely. Executives trying to buy culture things like productivity, quality, morale through external programs, speeches, training, or structural changes like mergers.
Trying to fix it from the outside.
Yes, they're trying to achieve outcomes, the harvest, without planting and cultivating the soil, which is the trust climate. They often ignore the fact that they might have created a low-trust environment through their own manipulative or shortcut-oriented behaviors. These methods fail because they violate the natural principles required to build a high-trust, effective culture.
And there's the author's personal story about his daughter's 3rd birthday party, wanting her to share her new presents.
Yeah, that's a great example.
He's a human relations expert, but in the moment, with emotions high, his instinct was to step in and teach sharing, force the issue.
And the source reflects on that, suggesting there's a time and place for teaching. When emotions are running high and relationships are strained, attempting to teach can be perceived as judgment, not help.
Right.
Effective teaching, effective influence often happens when the relationship is strong, when the emotional bank account is high. And there might even be a natural sequence in a child's development. Perhaps a sense of possessing needs to develop before genuine sharing can truly be understood and embraced. It requires patience and respecting the process, not just forcing the outcome.
So listener, if you feel frustrated by a lack of progress, either in your own growth or in trying to improve relationships or teams, maybe you're trying to skip essential steps in this natural sequential process.
You can't rush a natural system. Which brings us back to a core insight the author keeps returning to. The way we see the problem is the problem.
This statement feels counterintuitive initially. When we have a problem, we usually think the problem is the problem, not how we see it.
Exactly. And when people see successful people or organizations, their knee-jerk reaction, often driven by that personality ethic, is, how do you do it? Teach me the techniques. They're looking for a quick fix, an external solution to relieve the pain.
And techniques can offer temporary relief. The source calls them social aspirin and Band-Aids. They can address cosmetic or acute symptoms.
Right. They might make things look or feel better for a little while, but the underlying chronic condition remains. And the source makes a critical point here.
What's that?
Focusing on those quick fixes for acute problems actually contributes to the chronic condition.
How so?
Because you're reinforcing the wrong approach. You're not addressing the root cause, which is often your paradigm, your way of seeing things. You're putting a Band-Aid on a deeper wound.
Let's look at those introductory problems again through this lens. The manager with disloyal employees, despite being friendly and taking management courses.
Okay. The personality ethic might suggest more team-building exercises or better incentive program.
Right, more techniques.
But the source asks, is the manager's underlying perception of the employees perhaps seeing them as objects to be managed for results, not people with intrinsic worth part of the problem? Is their deep inside paradigm fundamentally flawed? Is that what's creating the disloyalty?
Or the person feeling constantly pressured and hassled despite mastering time management techniques and planners.
A typical time management approach might suggest better efficiency, packing more in, color-coding tasks.
Yeah, be more efficient.
But the source questions. Is efficiency really the answer? Or does it just increase the pace at which you react to external demands? Is the real issue a deeper paradigm about time, about life, about your own worth and control that needs examining?
And the marriage that feels flat despite counseling and trying various techniques.
The typical approach might focus on better communication techniques or negotiating compromises. date nights.
Yeah, schedule more quality time.
But the source asks, is your spouse the real problem? Or is it possible that you, through your own paradigms and behavior, are empowering their weaknesses? Is there a basic paradigm you hold about your spouse, about marriage, or about love itself that is feeding the problem? Is how you see them the issue?
So our paradigms, especially those rooted in the personality ethic, don't just affect how we solve problems. They affect how we see the problems in the first place.
Yes, they predetermine our approach and often trap us in cycles of ineffective behavior. And the source notes that there's a growing sense of disillusionment with this.
People are getting tired of it.
Yeah, people, particularly leaders, are getting tired of motivational platitudes and superficial fixes. They want substance, a process, principle-based approaches that yield long-term, sustainable results. They're looking for the character ethic.
And if the way we see the problem is the problem, then we need a new way to see. We need a new map.
Exactly. As Einstein observed, you can't solve significant problems at the same level of thinking that created them.
Right.
The deep issues created by living within the personality ethic require a completely different level of thinking, one grounded in principles.
This is where the inside-out approach comes in.
That's the core of the 7 habits. It's principle-centered, character-based, and it starts, well, inside.
Inside out, meaning?
The focus begins with the self. Specifically the innermost part of self, your paradigms, your character, your motives. You work on yourself first.
Give us some concrete examples of what inside out looks like in practice.
Okay. If you want a happy marriage, the inside out approach says the starting point is you. Be the kind of person who generates positive energy, who is patient, kind, understanding.
Instead of trying to change your spouse.
Exactly. Don't wait for your spouse to change. Focus on being a great marriage partner. If you want a cooperative teenager, look inward. Be an understanding, consistent, loving parent yourself first.
Lead by example.
If you want more trust in your professional life, be trustworthy first. It's about focusing on developing primary greatness in yourself, that character foundation.
So it's about private victories first. Winning the battles within yourself.
Absolutely. Making and keeping promises to yourself, building that inner integrity and self-mastery is the necessary foundation. You can't effectively make and keep promises to others or have deep relationships if you can't even manage yourself.
You can't give what you don't have.
Precisely. You can't put personality techniques ahead of character development and expect lasting results.
And the source describes this inside-out process as a continuous journey. Right. Not a one-time fix.
Exactly. An upward spiral of renewal based on natural laws, leading to increasing responsibility and effectiveness both individually and in relationships.
So it builds on itself.
The author states clearly that he's never seen lasting happiness or success come from the outside in.
The outside-in paradigm.
It leads to feeling like a victim, being immobilized, constantly focusing on others' weaknesses or difficult circumstances. You see spouses blaming each other, groups locked in conflict, labor disputes, international situations, where each side is convinced the problem is out there in the other side.
And that belief the problem is out there is the outside-in paradigm. That's the trap.
Yes, and the inside-out approach is a dramatic paradigm shift precisely because our natural inclination, reinforced by societal conditioning and the personality ethic, is to look outward, to blame circumstances or others. It takes conscious effort to look inward first.
So, listener, when you're facing a challenge, where is your attention usually directed? Is it outward focusing on what others are doing wrong or how circumstances are stacked against you? Or is it inward, examining your own perspective, your character, your motives? That's a really challenging question.
It is. And this entire inside-out framework, this principle-centered approach, is built around developing effective habits.
Habits.
Yeah.
Okay, we all have habits, good and bad. How does the book define them in this context? It's not just about brushing your teeth, is it?
No, it's deeper. A habit in this framework is the intersection of 3 things: knowledge, skill, and desire.
Knowledge, skill, desire.
Knowledge is the what to do and the why you should do it. Skill is the how to do it. And desire is the want to do it, the motivation.
Want to.
All 3 components are essential to make something a true habit that is deeply integrated into your life. You need all 3 legs of the stool.
So if you want to become a truly effective listener, you need to understand that listening is important. And why? Knowledge. Know how to listen empathetically. And genuinely want to listen, be motivated to understand desire. You can know what and how, but without the want, it won't become a habit. You won't actually do it consistently.
Exactly. And the process of changing paradigms and developing new habits involves working on all 3. The source talks about the being-seeing change.
Easy.
As you work on your character, your being, it changes the way you see the world, your seeing, which in turn influences your being, creating this continuous upward spiral of growth. Working on knowledge, skill, and desire is how you break free from old ineffective paradigms and build new ones.
This process isn't always comfortable, though. It sounds like it requires sacrifice.
It does. It requires subordinating what you might want right now for what you want eventually. The source suggests that happiness, in part, is the fruit of having the desire and ability to sacrifice immediate gratification for eventual, more meaningful goals. It takes discipline.
The 7 habits themselves are presented as incremental, sequential steps, moving you along what the author calls the maturity continuum.
Right. This continuum describes the natural process of human growth and effectiveness. It starts from dependence, where we are born, completely relying on others for everything.
Then moving to independence, becoming self-reliant, inner-directed, capable of taking care of ourselves in all aspects of life, physically, mentally, emotionally, financially.
And the source calls independence a worthy and liberating goal. It's a significant step, a major achievement for many.
But it's not the end goal.
No, because life is ultimately interdependent. We live, work, and relate with others. Achieving maximum effectiveness requires moving beyond just independence to interdependence.
So interdependence isn't just needing people like dependence. It's something more mature.
Precisely. As an interdependent person, you are self-reliant and capable. You've achieved independence, but you recognize that you can accomplish far more, create better results, and have richer experiences by working cooperatively with others. This applies physically, working together, emotionally, the need for love and belonging, giving and receiving. And intellectually, combining different perspectives is better than just one. You have the security from your independence to be vulnerable and share deeply, while also accessing the vast resources that others offer.
And dependent people can't really do that.
Dependent people lack the character, the sense of self-possession, the inner security to truly choose interdependence. They might need others, but they can't form healthy, mutually beneficial, interdependent relationships.
And this is where the habits fit into that continuum.
Yes. Habits 1, 2, and 3 are the private victories. They focus on self-mastery, moving you from dependence to independence. They build that character base, that inner core.
Okay, 1, 2, 3 are about me.
Right. These private victories must precede the public victories habits 4, 5, and 6, which focus on teamwork, cooperation, and communication in interdependent situations. You can't harvest the fruits of good relationships before you've planted and cultivated the character within yourself.
But you don't have to be perfect at 1, 2, and 3 before starting the others.
No, the source clarifies that. It's an upward spiral, not a rigid ladder. But independence is the necessary foundation for effective interdependence.
Okay.
Without that strong base of self-mastery, attempts at communication or collaboration techniques, the public victory habits, will lack authenticity and likely fail or feel hollow in the long run. You'll be using techniques without the character to back them up.
So, listener, reflecting on your own journey, where do you feel you are on this maturity continuum? Are you still struggling with feelings of victimhood or relying heavily on others for dependence? Have you become effectively independent but find deep collaborative relationships challenging, lacking effective interdependence? Recognizing this can help you focus your efforts.
And the very first step towards independence, the first private victory, is habit 1. Be proactive.
Be proactive. This feels like something we hear a lot, but the book gives it a really specific, powerful meaning.
It does. It's fundamentally about taking responsibility for your own life. The power lies in that word, responsible, which the source cleverly breaks down as responsible. We have the ability to choose our response to any given circumstance.
Between stimulus and response, there's a space.
Exactly. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. And this ability is reflected in our language. The source contrasts reactive and proactive language.
Okay, like what?
Reactive language comes from a paradigm of victimhood, blaming external factors, saying things like, "There's nothing I can do, that's just how I am, he makes me so mad." It transfers responsibility.
Right.
Proactive language reflects ownership and choice. I can choose a different approach. I control my own feelings. Proactive people acknowledge their feelings are real, but they subordinate those feelings to their values.
Values over feelings.
Yes. Love, for example, is presented as a verb. It's the actions you take, the sacrifices, the giving of self, regardless of whether you feel loving in the moment. It's a choice, a value you live by.
The concept of the circle of concern versus the circle of influence is a brilliant way to visualize proactivity, I think.
It really is so clear. Your circle of concern contains everything you care about, everything that occupies your mind, global events, national debt, others' weaknesses, the weather, things you have little or no direct control over.
All the stuff we worry about.
Your circle of influence is a smaller circle inside that, containing only the things you can actually do something about: your own behavior, your attitude, your choices, your responses.
And where you choose to focus your energy determines which circle grows. Is that right?
Exactly. Reactive people focus on the circle of concern. They dwell on problems they can't solve, criticize others, blame circumstances. This negative energy actually shrinks their circle of influence, leaving them feeling more helpless and victimized. Proactive people focus their energy on the circle of influence, working on what they can control. This positive, focused energy expands their circle of influence over time, giving them greater capacity to impact their circumstances.
The author brings back the anecdote about his son's school problems here.
Yes, it illustrates this perfectly. Initially, they focused on the son's weaknesses and how others treated him firmly in the circle of concern.
And what happened?
Nothing changed. They just felt more inadequate and frustrated. True effectiveness and the ability to influence the situation came only when they shifted their focus to their own paradigms, their own responses, things within their circle of influence. They changed themselves to influence the conditions around them.
Wow. That's the inside-out approach again.
The book categorizes problems into 3 types: direct control, our own behavior, our habits; indirect control, others' behavior; and no control, things like the past or unchangeable situations.
Okay.
And the proactive approach puts the solution to all 3 types of problems within our circle of influence. Direct control problems are solved by working on our own habits. That's habits 1, 2, 3, the private victories. Indirect control problems are solved by changing our methods of influence. That's habits 4, 5, 6, the public victories. Things like empathy or persuasion by example, rather than trying to force the other person to change.
And the no control problems, the things we really can't change.
These are solved by changing our response, how we see and accept the reality. The source calls it changing the line on the bottom of your face, choosing to smile, to accept peacefully. It's about taking responsibility for our inner state, even when we can't change the outer circumstance, like the serenity prayer.
Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change.
The courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That acceptance, that choice, is a powerful action within your circle of influence.
And by consciously choosing our response, we can dramatically influence our circumstances, even indirectly.
Absolutely. The source gives the powerful example of Gandhi. He didn't spend his energy primarily criticizing the British Empire, circle of concern, but focused on building trust and influence among field laborers through his own character, compassion, and courage, circle of influence. This quiet, focused effort ultimately expanded his influence dramatically.
That's fascinating. He worked on himself and his immediate impact first.
Yes. The source also uses the terms the haves and the bees. The circle of concern is filled with, if only I had a different job, a more supportive boss, better circumstances, always looking outside.
Right.
The circle of influence is filled with, I can be more patient, more courageous, more loving, more diligent, working on the inside. Anytime we think the problem is out there, that thought itself is the problem.
Because it gives power away.
It gives power to external things over us. That's the outside-in trap. The proactive inside-out approach says be different first, and by being different, you create positive change in the world around you.
The story of Joseph in Egypt is used here too, right? Extreme circumstances.
Yeah. Extreme. Sold into slavery, unjustly imprisoned, his circumstances were entirely in the circle of concern, but he focused on being. He remained diligent, trustworthy, and proactive, exercising choice within his inner circle, his character. And this ultimately led to him gaining influence, eventually over Potiphar's household, then in the prison, and finally, essentially ruling Egypt.
So even in seemingly powerless situations, our power to choose our response remains. Let's revisit that marriage problem again from this angle.
Okay. Focusing on your spouse's weaknesses or continually listing their sins, circle of concern, traps you in victimhood and diminishes your ability to influence the situation positively. Your criticism often makes things worse, right?
Yeah, usually.
The most constructive, proactive path is to focus on yourself, work on being a great marriage partner, modeling the behavior you wish to see, making deposits in the emotional bank account. Your proactive example is your most potent influence. Happiness, like unhappiness, is presented as a proactive choice.
What about mistakes and consequences? Those can feel like they're outside our control once they happen.
That's true. While we choose our actions within our circle of influence, the consequences of those actions are often governed by natural law and are in the circle of concern. Step off a cliff, gravity takes over.
Right.
Similarly, a mistake, once made, is in the circle of concern. It's happened. However, admitting the mistake, correcting it if possible, and learning from it, that's entirely within our circle of influence. That's the proactive response to a past event. Proactive people take responsibility for their choices and the consequences, guided by principles.
And making and keeping commitments, even small ones, is key to building that inner integrity and self-control needed for proactivity. It builds that muscle.
Yes. Knowledge, skill, and desire are all within our control. By deliberately working on these and consistently making and keeping commitments to ourselves and others, we build the strength of character that fuels proactivity. Integrity is built one commitment at a time.
The author challenges the listener with a 30-day test of proactivity. What does that involve?
It's simple, but profound. For 30 days, consciously focus your energy only on your circle of influence. Work on your own behavior, attitude, and responses. Make small commitments to yourself and others and keep them.
Be impeccable with your word.
Yes. Instead of criticizing, model. Instead of judging, be a light. Be part of the solution, not the problem. Look at others' weaknesses with compassion, not accusation. And if you start thinking the problem is out there, stop yourself. That thought is the problem. Take responsibility for your thoughts, too.
The source says that those who consistently exercise this freedom of choice daily will find it expands.
While those who don't will see it wither, becoming lived by circumstances and other scripts, reactive.
Samuel Johnson's quote resonates here. The fountain of content must spring up in the mind.
And he who hath so little knowledge of human nature as to seek happiness by changing anything but his own disposition will waste his life in fruitless efforts and multiply the grief he proposes to remove. Proactivity truly starts from within.
Listener, how much of your time and energy are spent worrying about things you can't control? Are you using reactive or proactive language? Could you commit to the 30-day test? What small commitment could you make to yourself today and keep? That's a powerful starting point.
It really is. And building on that foundation of proactive choice, the second private victory, moving towards independence, is habit 2. Begin with the end in mind.
Begin with the end in mind. This is about having a clear vision of your destination, knowing where you're going.
It's based on the principle that all things are created twice. There's the mental creation, the first creation, and then the physical creation, the second creation.
Like building a house.
Exactly. You don't just start hammering nails randomly. You first create it mentally. You visualize the kind of home, you plan, you create blueprints. That's the first creation. The physical building is the second.
And mistakes in the first creation are costly.
Hugely costly. Carpenters say measure twice, cut once, because errors in the blueprint are incredibly expensive and difficult to fix during the physical construction.
So taking charge of that first creation is essential for effectiveness.
It is. It requires using our imagination to envision possibilities in our conscious, to connect with our deepest values, principles, unique talents, and potential contribution. It's about becoming the scriptwriter of your own life.
Writing your own script.
Rather than living by default based on scripts handed down from your past, your upbringing, or societal conditioning.
What about starting a business? How does this apply?
Same principle. You first define the purpose, the product or service, the market, the values guiding it. That's the first creation. Only then do you organize resources and execute, the second creation. The source argues that most business failures stem from errors in that first creation, a flawed plan, a misunderstanding of the market, a lack of clear purpose or values.
And parenting.
If your desired end, your vision, is to raise responsible, self-disciplined children with strong values, you must keep that end clearly in mind as you interact with them daily. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to act consistently with that desired outcome, that first creation.
So, consciously designing your life through that first creation process, that expands your circle of influence from habit 1.
Yes. If you don't take responsibility for writing your own script, for defining your end in mind, others will fill that vacuum. Your life will be shaped by default by other people's agendas, by circumstances, by old conditioning, by scripts that may not serve you or align with your deepest values.
This is where the distinction between leadership and management becomes vital, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. Leadership is the first creation. It's deciding which jungle you're in.
Okay.
It's the right brain, high-level work of clarifying values, direction, and purpose. It's asking, what are the things I want to accomplish? Management is the second creation, efficiently climbing the trees in that jungle.
Doing things right.
Right. It's the left brain, detail-oriented work of organizing, sequencing, and executing. It's asking, how can I best accomplish certain things? The source states emphatically, no management success can compensate for failure in leadership. You can be incredibly efficient at climbing trees, the best tree climber in the world, but if you're in the wrong jungle,
It doesn't matter how fast you climb.
you're just efficiently getting lost. Being trapped in a management paradigm without leadership means focusing only on control, efficiency, rules, getting things done, without considering direction, purpose, or values.
The anecdote about the oil company president shifting from management to leadership is a great illustration.
It is. He realized he was buried in the urgent, pressing demands of management details, effectively climbing trees frantically, putting out fires. But he wasn't leading. He wasn't defining the direction, the culture, the purpose for the long term.
So what did he do?
He made a conscious, difficult decision to withdraw from those daily management fires and dedicate significant time to leadership thinking strategically, building culture, analyzing trends, seizing new opportunities. It was initially painful for him and the organization, used to his immediate involvement.
I bet.
But focusing on that first creation, on leadership, led to dramatic growth, doubling revenues and quadrupling profits eventually.
Wow. So before we can efficiently manage our time or tasks, which sounds like habit 3, we need to lead our lives, define what truly matters. Habit 2.
Exactly. We need to become our own first creators, using our self-awareness from habit 1, imagination and conscience, to rescript our lives based on our deepest values, not just react to past conditioning or external pressures.
The source mentions Viktor Frankl and the idea of finding your mission. How does that fit?
Frankl, from his experience in concentration camps, observed that we don't invent our missions, we detect them. Our conscience gives us a sense of our uniqueness and the potential contribution only we can make.
Okay.
Trying to find abstract meaning outside our circle of concern, outside the responsibility for our own lives and choices, is abdicating that proactive role. Meaning comes from within. Life asks us questions, and we answer by taking responsibility for our lives and our unique mission.
So habit 1 says you are the programmer.
And habit 2 says, write the program. You have to accept the first, that you can choose, before you'll invest the effort needed for the second, defining what you choose.
And writing a personal mission statement is a practical tool for this writing the program.
Yes. It's essentially a personal constitution, a written declaration of your core values and direction. It's not something you dash off overnight. It takes deep introspection, analysis, maybe multiple drafts over time.
It evolves.
It evolves. But it's a crucial step in giving concrete expression to what you want to be, character, and do, contributions and achievements.
Yeah.
Reviewing it regularly keeps that end in mind vividly. The source suggests imagining your own funeral and what you'd want people you care about to say about you as a powerful technique for clarifying those deepest values.
That's intense but effective. And visualization and affirmation can help keep that mission present in your daily life.
Yes. Affirmations, when constructed properly, personal, positive, present tense, visual, and emotional, can harness the power of the right brain, the imagination, to help integrate your mission and values into your daily actions.
Give an example.
Okay, the example given is a parent who tends to overreact. They might create an affirmation like, I am patient, loving, and understanding with my children, especially when they are challenging. Then they visualize themselves responding that way in specific, difficult situations. By doing this repeatedly, visualizing the desired behavior, you start living from that chosen value system rather than defaulting to old reactive scripts. The author used this visualization technique successfully with one of his sons to improve his performance in football by having him visualize playing perfectly.
So you're mentally rehearsing the first creation.
Exactly. Strengthening that first creation so it influences the second creation, your actual behavior.
Listener, have you consciously designed your life, defining what success truly looks like for you based on your deepest values? Or are you living by default, following scripts handed to you? Do you have a clear sense of your end in mind? Are you leading your life before trying to manage it efficiently?
With that clear vision in place, habit 2, the next step is the discipline to make it happen day by day. That's the third private victory, habit 3. Put first things first.
Put first things first. This is the physical creation, the execution, living out the script you wrote in Habit 2. This is where the rubber meets the road.
It really is. It's primarily a function of independent willia, your ability to make decisions and act on them, to proactively carry out your chosen program rather than being acted upon by circumstances or impulses.
Self-discipline.
Self-discipline, yes. And it's a function of personal integrity, which is the value you place on yourself and your ability to make and keep commitments, especially the commitments you make to yourself based on your values.
So leadership decides the first things, Habit 2, and management puts them first daily, Habit 3.
Exactly. Management in this positive sense is discipline derived from being a disciple to your own deepest principles, values, and purpose that you defined in Habit 2. It's about subordinating your feelings, impulses, and moods to those higher values and goals. The source quotes E.M. Gray's common denominator of success.
Look at that.
After studying successful people for years, Gray found they simply have the habit of doing things that failures don't like doing. They don't necessarily like doing them either, but their dislike is subordinated to the strength of their purpose.
So they do it anyway because it aligns with their end in mind.
Precisely. That's putting first things first, subordinating feelings to values.
This leads us to time management. But the book introduces a different way of approaching it. Quadrant 2 organization. What's that about? It sounds like a step beyond typical time planners.
It is. Traditional time management, often called third generation, focuses on efficiency, prioritizing tasks, setting goals, maybe daily planning, squeezing more into your day. The fourth generation, Quadrant 2 organization, shifts the focus from managing time to managing yourself based on principles.
Managing yourself, not time.
Okay. It focuses on effectiveness by organizing your life, specifically your week, around your deepest values and mission. Habit 2. It's principle-centered self-management.
And the core idea is focusing on Quadrant 2 activities. How did that work?
Imagine a matrix. One axis is urgency, the other is importance. This creates 4 quadrants. Quadrant 1 is urgent and important crises, deadlines, pressing problems. Quadrant 3 is urgent but not important. Many interruptions, some meetings, emails, other people's minor issues that feel pressing. Quadrant 4 is not urgent and not important trivia, busy work, time wasters.
Okay, so where's Quadrant 2?
Quadrant 2 is the heart of effective self-management. These are the activities that are important but not urgent.
Like what?
Things like strategic planning, prevention, relationship building, identifying new opportunities, exercise, deep learning, reviewing your mission statement, even doing this Quadrant 2 organizing itself. They are crucial for long-term effectiveness, success, and well-being.
But they don't yell at you.
Exactly. Because they aren't urgent, they tend to get pushed aside by the tyranny of the constant demands of Quadrant 1 and the deceptive urgency of Quadrant 3. Effective people focus on Quadrant 2.
So making time for those vital Quadrant 2 activities means taking it from Quadrants 3 and 4, the not important stuff.
Absolutely. Quadrant 1, crises, will always demand some time, but effective people minimize it by focusing on prevention, Quadrant 2. Most of the time for Quadrant 2 has to be carved out of Quadrants 3 and 4.
The urgent but not important, and the not urgent, not important.
Right. Quadrants 4 and 3 tend to act on you, demanding your time reactively. To proactively focus on Quadrant 2, you must learn to say no to other things, including things that feel urgent but aren't truly important according to your values. Quadrant 3.
Saying no can be hard.
It requires independent will, Habit 3, and a strong sense of your own priorities based on a clear yes burning inside from Habit 2. The anecdote about the author's wife agreeing to chair a committee she didn't really want to, just because she couldn't say no easily, illustrates how hard it is to say no without a clear yes to something more important guiding you.
The book outlines a framework for this Quadrant 2 weekly organizing. What are the key elements?
It should be principle-centered, aligned with your core values, conscience-directed, helping you live in integrity, rooted in your unique mission, Habit 2, help you balance your life by identifying your different roles, for example, parent, partner, manager, individual, community member, and provide context through a weekly review where you set specific, achievable Quadrant 2 goals for each role.
So it's planning the week, not just the day.
Yes. The weekly perspective provides better context and balance. The focus is on relationships and results first, and time second. It's not about cramming more in, but about making sure the important things get done.
Living this requires integrity, subordinating schedules, and impulses to values, especially when those urgent things pop up.
Yes. It's easy to write a quadrant 2 plan. The challenge is living it when faced with the urgent demands of quadrant first or the deceptive urgency of quadrant third. But being principle-centered allows for flexibility.
How so?
If a higher value, say, an important relationship need demands you deviate from your schedule, you can do so consciously and without guilt because you're acting in integrity with your deepest principles, not just reacting impulsively. The anecdote of the son who scheduled a phone call to break up with his girlfriend highlights the trap of valuing efficiency with people over effectiveness, trying to manage relationships like tasks, which just doesn't work.
That's a crucial distinction. Effectiveness with people, efficiency with things. You can't be efficient with a relationship problem.
Right. You can't quantify quality time with people in efficient 10-minute blocks and expect deep connection. The frustration felt by mothers with small children, for example, often comes from trying to meet external expectations or schedules, social mirror, rather than prioritizing based on their own values and the needs of the moment. Habit 2. Having that strong sense of habit 2 allows them to adapt their schedule with integrity, knowing they're putting first things first according to their principles, even if the schedule changes.
Delegation is another key part of putting first things first, right? Freeing up your time for quadrant 2 by empowering others.
Absolutely. Effective delegation is probably the single best indicator of effective management. It's about accomplishing more through others, but it needs to be done effectively. The source contrasts two types: gopher delegation and stewardship delegation.
Gopher delegation sounds like telling someone exactly what to do.
Pretty much. It's micromanagement. The focus is on method. Go for this, then do this, then report back, then do that. The manager supervises closely, gives step-by-step instructions. It's low trust, low effectiveness, breeds dependence, and keeps the manager tied up overseeing everything.
Okay, so what's stewardship delegation?
It's a paradigm shift. It focuses on results, not just methods. You give people a trust, a stewardship over the outcome.
How does that work practically?
It requires a clear, upfront understanding and agreement covering 5 areas: desired results, what needs to be achieved, the what and why, guidelines, parameters, principles, potential pitfalls to avoid but not specific methods, resources, human, financial, technical support available, accountability, standards of performance and reporting times, and consequences, what happens, good and bad, as a result of the evaluation.
That sounds much more empowering.
It is. It requires high trust initially, but it unleashes creativity and capability in the other person. It fosters their growth. The green and clean yard example makes this clear. Instead of sweep the leaves, mow the lawn, gopher, it's keep the yard green and clean. You decide how. Stewardship, giving freedom in method as long as the desired result is achieved.
The learner-controlled instruction anecdote is impressive too.
Yes, trainees were given the criteria for success, desired results, and access to resources, then empowered to figure out the methods themselves. They drastically reduced training time and increased effectiveness because they were trusted and engaged.
This leads to win-win performance agreements.
Exactly. A form of stewardship delegation where the focus is on mutually agreed upon results, fostering partnership and synergy. People essentially evaluate themselves against these clear, pre-agreed criteria. Peter Drucker's concept of the manager's letter, where employees propose their goals and standards, is a similar idea.
Listener, are you managing your time based on what feels urgent? Or are you managing yourself based on what is truly important? Are you consistently focusing on those vital quadrant 2 activities? When you delegate, are you giving instructions, gopher, or empowering results, stewardship?
Now, as we transition from these private victories, building that strong base of self-mastery and independence with habits 1, 2, and 3, we move into the public victories, focusing on effective interaction with others.
This is the move from independence to effective interdependence. Getting along well and achieving more with others.
Which, as we discussed, requires maturity and a strong foundation built in those first 3 habits. The source emphasizes again here that the most crucial ingredient in any relationship isn't your techniques or even your words, but your being your character.
Who you are.
Who you are. If your actions come from superficial techniques, others will sense it, they'll feel a lack of authenticity, maybe even duplicity.
The distinction between acute and chronic pain comes up here again in relationships.
Yes. Problems with others often manifest as acute pain arguments, misunderstandings, conflicts. They're intense and immediate, driving us to seek quick-fix techniques from the personality ethic to alleviate the discomfort. How can I make them understand?
Right.
But the source argues this acute pain is often an outgrowth of a deeper chronic problem, a lack of personal leadership and management, habits 1, 2, 3, and ourselves. You can endure chronic pain, like low self-discipline or unclear values, for years. But acute pain, a relationship blow-up, demands action, often leading us to the wrong solutions, the Band-Aids.
So effectiveness in interdependence also relies on the PPC balance, production and production capability.
Yes. In interdependent relationships, the golden eggs are the synergistic results, the cooperation, the outcomes you achieve together. The goose, PC, is the relationship itself.
Yeah.
The trust, the emotional connection, the understanding.
You have to feed the goose.
You have to invest in the PC, care for the goose, nurture the relationship to continue getting the golden eggs of collaboration and positive outcomes.
This is where the emotional bank account metaphor becomes so powerful. Explain that.
It's a brilliant metaphor for the amount of trust that's been built up in a relationship. Think of it like a financial bank account.
Okay.
Deposits are acts of courtesy, kindness, honesty, keeping commitments, clarifying expectations, apologizing sincerely when you make a withdrawal. These build trust, build the balance.
And withdrawals.
Withdrawals are things like discourtesy, disrespect, interrupting, overreacting, ignoring, betraying trust, breaking promises, pride, arrogance. These erode trust, lower the balance.
When the account balance is high, communication is easy and effective, isn't it?
Effortless, almost. You have a reserve of trust that can absorb misunderstandings or minor mistakes.
Yeah.
There's openness, forgiveness is easier. But when the account is low or overdrawn, every interaction is tense, difficult. You're walking on eggshells or navigating minefields. It leads to defensiveness, politicking, protecting yourself, and relationships that are either cold and distant accommodation or outright hostile. Many organizations and families struggle because the emotional bank account is deeply overdrawn between key people. Constant deposits are needed.
And problems in interdependent situations can actually be opportunities to make deposits.
Exactly. The source frames them as P, problems that are PC opportunities. Instead of just being irritated by a child's problem or a colleague's mistake, you can see it as an opportunity to make a deposit by responding with understanding and helpfulness to strengthen the relationship. PC. A customer complaint isn't just a problem to be solved quickly. It's an opportunity for a store clerk to build loyalty, PC, by handling it well and making the customer feel valued.
So the habits of interdependence, habits 4, 5, and 6, the public victories, are built on that strong character and high emotional bank account developed in the private victories.
Absolutely. Effective interdependence is achieved by independent people. Trying to use techniques for communication or collaboration without that character base and trust foundation will feel hollow and likely fail. You need the private victory first.
Let's dive into the first of these public victories. Habit 4. Think win-win.
Think win-win. This is a fundamental paradigm for human interaction. It's not just a negotiation technique you pull out sometimes. It's a total philosophy of constantly seeking mutual benefit in all relationships and endeavors.
So the goal is always solutions that are mutually beneficial and satisfying.
Yes. Everyone walks away feeling good about the outcome and committed to the plan because it serves their interests too. It sees life as fundamentally cooperative, not just competitive.
And this stems from what the source calls the abundance mentality.
Yes, that's the bedrock. The belief that there is plenty out there for everybody, that success is not a zero-sum game where one person's win must come at another's expense. My success doesn't take away from yours. In fact, we can create more success together.
This is where the third alternative comes in. What's that?
Instead of my way or your way, which often leads to win, lose, or lose-win, win-win thinking actively seeks a third alternative, a better, higher way that works for both parties, a synergistic solution that might be different from what either person initially proposed.
The source contrasts win-win with other paradigms of interaction. What are they?
Right, there are 6 in total. You have win-lose. If I win, you lose. This is the authoritarian approach, using position, power, credentials to get your way. Often scripted from childhood comparison or conditional love, it creates either subservience or rebellion.
Okay, then lose-win.
I lose, you win. This is the appeaser, the nice guy, who wants to keep the peace or gain acceptance, often rooted in a lack of courage or low self-esteem. They get taken advantage of and build resentment.
Lose-lose.
That's what happens when 2 stubborn win-lose individuals interact, or when people become so focused on hurting the other person, like in bitter divorces or wars, that they end up destroying themselves too. It's the philosophy of conflict. Or sometimes when highly dependent people interact, lacking the inner resources for mutual benefit.
What about just win?
This person focuses only on getting what they want without necessarily wanting the other person to lose, but they don't care about the other person's outcome either. It's still fundamentally self-centered and can damage relationships in the long run, even if they achieve their immediate goal.
So that leaves win-win.
The ideal. Mutual benefit, mutual satisfaction. Both parties feel good about the outcome and the process. And importantly, win-win or no deal.
Win-win or no deal.
This is a realistic and often higher form of win-win. It means if you can't find a solution that is genuinely beneficial to both parties, you agree to disagree agreeably, no deal. It's better than forcing a bad compromise or a lose-win situation, especially for important relationships or decisions. It preserves the relationship even if the specific deal doesn't happen.
The anecdote about the company president wanting cooperation but rewarding competition with that race to Bermuda chart really highlights the problem with systems that don't support win-win.
Exactly. It's a classic example. You can't just tell people to cooperate while the system rewards individualistic, competitive win-lose behavior. You can't harvest the fruits of cooperation from a competitive root. The problem wasn't just the people. It was the flawed system, the paradigm embedded in the reward structure that needed changing.
The book emphasizes that win-win isn't just a technique. It requires specific character traits built on the private victories. What are they?
3 traits are crucial. First, integrity. This is the value we place on ourselves, knowing what constitutes a win for you that aligns with your deepest values, habit 2, and the ability to make and keep commitments to yourself, habit 3. It's the cornerstone. Without self-integrity, commitments to others feel hollow and breed distrust.
Okay, integrity. What else?
Second, maturity. This isn't about age. It's the balance between courage, the willingness to express your feelings and convictions, and consideration, respecting the feelings and convictions of others. High courage but low consideration leads to win-lose. High consideration but low courage leads to lose-win. Maturity, that balance, is essential for win-win. The source says it's being nice and tough.
Nice and tough. I like that. And the third trait?
The abundance mentality we mentioned earlier, this is key. The paradigm that there is plenty for everyone flows from deep inner worth and security, built-in habits 1, 2, 3. It manifests as a willingness to share credit, recognition, power, and profit. You're genuinely happy for others' success. You see differences as strengths and opportunities for synergy.
And the opposite is the scarcity mentality.
Yes, which sees life as a limited pie. If someone else gets a big piece, there's less for me. It's based on comparison, insecurity. People with a scarcity mentality have difficulty sharing credit or power, feel threatened by others' success, and often surround themselves with yes, people who won't challenge them. Public victory, effective interdependence, is a natural outgrowth of the abundance mentality.
How do you cultivate this win-win character, especially the abundance mentality, if you feel you have a scarcity one?
The source suggests associating with win-win models, finding mentors who embody these principles, reading inspiring literature, or seeing films that showcase integrity, maturity, and abundance, like biographies of figures such as Anwar Sadat, or films like Chariots of Fire, or Les Miserables. But ultimately, the deepest validation comes from consistently living these principles in your own life and seeing the positive results.
In practice, in relationships, the emotional bank account is central to win-win, isn't it?
Absolutely central. High trust, a high balance, allows you to focus on the issues, not get bogged down in personalities or defending your position. It creates the safety needed to be open, explore different options, and seek that third alternative.
But what about dealing with people who are deeply stuck in a win-lose paradigm? That's tough.
It is tough. The advice is to focus on your circle of influence, your response. Continue making deposits into the relationship account, courtesy, respect, appreciation, even if it feels one-sided initially. Practice deeper listening, habit 5. Express your own perspective with greater courage, balanced with consideration, maturity from habit 4. Be proactive, not reactive. Keep patiently working towards a mutual win until they sense your genuine desire for it, not just manipulation. This process itself is a huge deposit and can sometimes be transformational for the relationship.
So your own character and proactivity are your most powerful tools even then?
Yes. That's transformational leadership in action. And for those who absolutely refuse to move from win-lose, sometimes the only realistic win-win is no deal. Compromise is described as a lower form of win-win, sometimes necessary, but ideally you aim higher for synergistic solutions.
The source also notes that with high trust, you can support someone's decision even if you don't fully understand it.
Right, because you trust them, their character and judgment, even if the logic isn't clear to you. Without trust, even apparent agreement can be superficial or lead to passive-aggressive behavior, like the British train conductors example where they followed rules maliciously. Agreements mean very little without the character and relationship base to support them.
Agreements flow from relationships and give win-win definition, like performance or partnership agreements.
Right. They shift the dynamic from vertical supervision, I'm the boss watching you, to horizontal partnership. We're partners in achieving this success.
And win-win systems are crucial for reinforcing win agreements. You mentioned the Bermuda chart.
Yes. If the system rewards win-lose behaviors, like individual sales commissions that discourage teamwork or grading on a curve, people will play that game regardless of what you say about cooperation. The source has a great line. If you put good people in bad systems, you get bad results. You have to water the flowers you want to grow. Systems compensation, performance reviews, family chore distribution must align with and empower responsible, cooperative, win-win individuals.
And win-win processes are necessary too. The how matters.
Definitely. You can't force people to think win-win. How you arrive at solutions together is just as important as the solution itself. The process needs to embody win-win principles.
Listener, how do you typically approach disagreements or negotiations? Are you coming from a place of scarcity or abundance? Consider the systems you're a part of at work. At home, could they be unintentionally reinforcing win-lose thinking, even if you talk about teamwork?
Building on win-win, the next habit for effective interdependence, which is absolutely key to making win-win work, is habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood. This sounds like the golden rule of communication.
It really is. It's presented as the fundamental key to effective interpersonal communication. But the source points out a common problem. Most people listen with the intent to reply, not with the intent to understand.
So true. We're formulating our response, our rebuttal, our advice, while the other person is still talking.
Exactly. We spend years learning to read, write, and speak, but formal training in truly listening to deeply understand another person's frame of reference, their paradigm, is incredibly rare.
And just like win-win, true understanding isn't just about learning a technique, is it?
No, you can learn active listening techniques, but if others sense you're just using a technique without genuine care or empathy,
They feel manipulated.
they feel manipulated or that you're not being authentic and they won't trust you enough to be truly open. Influence, the ability to be understood and eventually persuade, comes from your example, your genuine conduct flowing from your character. Habit 1, 2, 3. If your character radiates trustworthiness, people feel safe. If you're inconsistent, hot 1 minute, cold the next, kind in public but critical in private, it's hard for people to feel safe opening up to you.
So effective listening starts with character and building that emotional bank account. You need trust for people to be vulnerable.
You need a positive balance. Empathic listening is listening with the intent to understand, not just hearing words, but understanding the meaning and feeling behind them. It means getting inside another person's frame of reference, seeing the world as they see it, acknowledging their reality as valid for them, even if you see things differently.
That sounds hard.
Yeah.
And maybe risky.
It requires personal security from habits 1, 2, 3, because you have to suspend your own viewpoint temporarily. And yes, it's risky because you might be changed by truly understanding someone else's perspective. You have to be vulnerable enough to be influenced.
The source describes our typical listening responses as autobiographical. What does that mean?
It means we tend to respond from our own frame of reference, our own autobiography. When someone shares something, especially a problem or feeling, our immediate, almost automatic response is to filter it through our own experiences and paradigms.
We project ourselves onto them.
Exactly. We jump in with advice based on what worked for us. You should just probe with questions that are really designed to satisfy our curiosity or fit our agenda. Did you try X? Why didn't you? Interpret what they're saying based on our motives or history. What you really mean is, or evaluate and judge them based on our values. That's wrong. Or you shouldn't feel that way.
These responses block real understanding, don't they?
Completely. Because they're about us, our story, our solutions, not about truly understanding their world. The anecdote about the parent responding to the daughter not liking school is a classic example.
Right, the dad jumps right in.
The daughter says she hates school, and the immediate barrage is autobiographical. Evaluate what? Probe. What's wrong? Advise, you just need to apply yourself. Interpret, you're just saying that because. He completely misses the chance to understand her underlying feelings and perspective. The source notes, We have such a tendency to rush in to fix things up with good advice, but we often fail to take the time to diagnose, to really deeply understand the problem first.
So the 4 common autobiographical responses are evaluate, probe, interpret, and advise. We should watch out for those in ourselves.
Recognizing these tendencies in yourself is the first crucial step towards changing them. Moving towards empathic listening involves consciously choosing a different response, one focused solely on understanding the other person.
What does that look like?
The source describes levels of empathic listening. The lowest level is merely mimicking content, parroting words. Better is rephrasing content, saying it in your own words. Even better is reflecting feeling, identifying the emotion behind the words. And the highest level combines the last two, rephrasing the content and reflecting the feeling accurately.
So it sounds like you feel emotion because content.
Something like that, yes. It shows you're understanding both the head and the heart. This takes conscious effort, time, and patience, but it's incredibly powerful for building trust, huge deposits in the emotional bank account, and achieving real understanding. You give the other person psychological air.
Psychological air.
The feeling of being heard, understood, validated. Once someone feels that, they often become much less defensive and more open to problem solving. And then, and only then.
Do you seek to be understood?
Exactly. Once the other person feels truly understood, once that emotional bank account is high, they're much more open to hearing your perspective, your ideas, your feelings.
And this part requires courage.
Yes. This is the balance. Habit 5 requires consideration first, understanding them, and then courage, expressing yourself. It's the maturity from habit 4 again, balancing courage and consideration. You express your ideas clearly, logically, and specifically, maybe even passionately. But because you've built that foundation of understanding and trust, your message is much more likely to be received respectfully and considered thoughtfully.
Listener, how often do you genuinely listen to understand, putting aside your own autobiography and responses? Or are you often formulating your reply while the other person is still talking? Are your initial reactions often one of those evaluating, probing, interpreting, or advising? How might practicing empathic listening change your key relationships?
When you combine the principle of seeking mutual benefit, win-win, habit 4, with the practice of deep empathetic understanding, seek first to understand, habit 5, you create the conditions for the magic of habit 6, synergize.
Synergize. This feels like the culmination where things really take off. 1 + 1 = 3 or more.
Yeah, it is. Synergy is the highest activity in all life, the source says. It's the result of valuing differences, mental, emotional, psychological differences between people. It's the principle that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's about creative cooperation, creating something entirely new and better together than either person could have created alone.
It's finding that third alternative we talked about with win-win, but maybe even going beyond it.
Exactly. Win-win communication, habit 4, built on high trust and deep mutual understanding, habit 5, opens the door to synergy. You move beyond mere compromise, which is often a lower form of win-win where both parties give something up, 1 + 1 = 1.5. Synergy aims higher, seeking a solution that incorporates the best of both perspectives and creates something even better. 1 + 1 = 3, 10, 100.
It builds both P, the result, and PC, the relationship.
Definitely. The anecdote about the husband wanting to go on a specific fishing trip and the wife wanting to visit her sick mother beautifully illustrates this shift. Compromise might have been splitting the vacation time, leaving both partly unsatisfied. Synergy involved truly understanding each other's needs, habit 5, and creatively searching for a third alternative, habit 4 thinking, that delighted both, maybe finding a beautiful fishing spot near where the mother lived, combining activities, strengthening their bond through the process. It's transformation, not just transaction or compromise.
Negative synergy is the opposite, I imagine. Driving with the brakes on.
That occurs when you try to solve problems using win-lose or lose-win approaches, or when there's low trust and poor communication. It creates negative energy conflict, rivalry, defensiveness, politicking, wasted effort, like driving with one foot on the gas and one on the brake. The source notes that dependent people often try to succeed in an interdependent reality using ineffective strategies, and this lack of maturity frequently results in negative synergy and poor outcomes.
A key mindset for synergy is valuing differences, you said. That seems counterintuitive sometimes. Don't differences cause conflict?
They can cause conflict if people are insecure. Insecure people, often rooted in the scarcity mentality, tend to be threatened by differences. They want everyone to think and act like them. They believe reality should conform to their paradigms. They mistake uniformity for unity.
But true unity comes from?
From complementarity. The source says sameness is not oneness. Unity is about bringing different pieces together to make a stronger whole. The essence of synergy is recognizing and celebrating those different perspectives, experiences, and strengths as valuable assets, not threats. Someone sees things differently. Great. Maybe they see something I'm missing. Let's explore that.
And there's interpersonal synergy as well, synergy within yourself. How does that work?
That's the foundation for interpersonal synergy. Interpersonal synergy comes from the security and integrity you build in habits 1, 2, and 3, which allows you to be open, vulnerable, and value different parts of yourself without feeling threatened. It's also about integrating both sides of your brain.
Left brain, right brain.
Exactly. The logical, analytical, verbal left brain and the intuitive, creative, visual, holistic right brain. Many people are scripted, especially through formal education, to favor the left brain, neglecting the powerful capabilities of the right brain. Whole brain thinking, valuing, and utilizing both is better equipped to navigate the complex reality of life, which is both logical and emotional.
The anecdote about the husband and wife's communication problem at lunch, where he couldn't understand her feelings.
Yes, that's a perfect example. He was operating from a purely left brain, fact-based analytical paradigm, trying to force her to explain her feelings and the gestalt of the situation in a logical, sequential way. Just give me the facts. He judged her right brain approach, her dealing with feelings and impressions, as illogical or dumbness.
Because he wasn't valuing that different way of processing.
Right. His lack of interpersonal synergy, not valuing or integrating both logical and emotional intuitive processing within himself, directly hindered his ability to achieve interpersonal synergy with his wife and truly understand her perspective. Habit 5, fail.
Listener, when you're collaborating or encountering different viewpoints, do you see those differences as a threat to be overcome or dismissed, or as an opportunity for creative synergy? Are you stuck in conflict or simply compromising when a truly synergistic third alternative might be possible? Are you tapping into both your analytical and your creative, intuitive thinking?
Finally, after exploring how to work effectively with others, we arrive at the capstone habit, the habit that makes all the others possible and sustainable over the long haul. Habit 7, sharpen the saw.
Sharpen the saw. I love this analogy, like the woodcutter too busy sawing to stop and sharpen his saw.
Exactly. This principle is about continuous renewal, taking time regularly to maintain and improve your most important asset, yourself, across 4 key interconnected dimensions of your nature.
What are the 4 dimensions?
Physical, spiritual, mental, and social-emotional. It's the habit of balanced self-renewal, applying the PPC balance principle to your own being. The P is your production, your effectiveness in life. The PC is your capability to produce your health, your knowledge, your spirit, your relationships.
And if you don't invest in PC, in sharpening the saw,
your capacity to produce P deteriorates, your saw gets dull, eventually you burn out, become ineffective, or your health fails. You can't keep producing effectively without maintaining the instrument.
let's quickly look at renewal in each dimension. Physical.
Physical renewal is caring for your body, proper nutrition, adequate rest, and consistent exercise that builds endurance, flexibility, and strength. Building physical PC through enduring physical hardship, like exercise, can even strengthen your character, your habit 1 muscle.
Spiritual dimension.
Spiritual renewal is about connecting with your core values and principles, your center. This could be through practices like meditation, prayer, studying inspirational texts, spending time in nature, listening to great music. This dimension provides leadership in your life. Habit 2, keeping your vision and values clear.
Mental renewal.
This is about educating your mind, continuously reading broadly and deeply, writing, planning, visualizing, engaging in mentally challenging activities. This provides management in your life. Habit 3, helping you organize, analyze, and execute effectively. Continuing education.
And the social-emotional dimension, how do you renew that?
This dimension is primarily renewed in your interactions with others by consciously practicing the public victory habits, 4, 5, 6, thinking win-win, seeking to understand, synergizing. It's about making consistent deposits in the emotional bank accounts of key relationships. It doesn't necessarily require separate time blocks, but rather conscious effort and skill exercise in your daily interactions. It also requires the personal security built in the private victories, 1, 2, 3, to engage authentically.
And neglecting any one dimension negatively impacts the others, right? They're interconnected.
Absolutely. If you neglect your physical health, it affects your mental sharpness and emotional stability. If you neglect your spiritual core, your values might become unclear, impacting your choices. If you neglect your relationships, it causes stress that affects other areas. Renewal is most powerful and sustainable when it's balanced across all 4 dimensions.
The source also applies this principle to organizations.
Yes, organizations also have 4 dimensions that need renewal: physical, economic, financial health; mental, talent development, learning; social, emotional, human relations, trust, culture, integrity, sense of purpose; and spiritual, shared vision, principle-centeredness, contribution.
Yeah.
Organizations that neglect any of these, like focusing only on the economic dimension, short-term profit,
Will likely see negative synergy.
right, internal conflict, low morale, high turnover, inefficiency, they burn out their people and erode trust, ultimately harming long-term economic health too. Balanced renewal is key for organizational vitality as well.
The source really highlights the importance of a daily private victory related to sharpening the saw. What's that?
It's recommending setting aside at least 1 hour per day, ideally perhaps in the morning before the day's demands hit, for renewal specifically in the physical, spiritual, and mental dimensions.
An hour a day. That sounds like a lot, but also fundamental.
It is fundamental. This is completely within your circle of influence. Habit 1. It's a high-leverage quadrant 2 activity. Habit 3. And it's presented as foundational for developing the strength of character, the self-control, and the inner security needed to live all the other habits effectively, especially handling the challenges of the public victories. Habits 4, 5, 6. It's the source of that intrinsic security required for empathy and synergy.
This commitment to renewal fuels the upward spiral of growth we talked about.
It does. Renewal is the process that empowers our movement on that upward spiral of learning, committing, and doing on increasingly higher planes. And guiding this continuous movement is our conscience.
A moral compass.
That innate sense that tells us whether our choices are aligned with correct principles. Educating and obeying our conscience requires conscious effort, concentration, balanced discipline, honest living, seeking out inspiring influences, great literature, noble thoughts, and living in harmony with its subtle voice. We have to actively avoid numbing it with trivial, violent, or degrading influences. Junk food for the mind and spirit.
Because that can replace natural conscience, what is right,
Yeah.
with social conscience, what's acceptable, will I get caught?
Exactly. A much lower level of functioning.
Once we have that self-awareness, habit 1, we must consciously choose principles to guide us. Habit 2.
Otherwise, the source warns that capacity for self-awareness can diminish and will revert to living reactively, being lived by external forces and old habits. The law of the harvest applies here too. You reap what you sow in terms of character development. There are truly no shortcuts.
But the empowering message throughout is, you are not your habits. Change is possible.
Absolutely. Old self-defeating patterns aren't permanent fixtures. They can be replaced with new habits of effectiveness, happiness, and trust-based relationships. This growth is evolutionary, happening step by step, day by day, but the cumulative effect, the net result over time, is revolutionary.
And the benefits start quickly.
The source assures us you'll feel benefits and see immediate payoffs as you start sincerely practicing these habits, even imperfectly. But it emphasizes again, it's not a quick fix. As Thomas Paine said, that which we obtain too easily, we esteem too lightly. The real value comes from the deliberate, consistent effort of sharpening the saw and living the habits.
Listener, are you intentionally investing in yourself, renewing your physical, spiritual, mental, and social emotional dimensions? Is your renewal balanced or are some areas neglected? What simple practice could you integrate into your daily or weekly routine starting today to truly sharpen the saw and maintain your effectiveness?
We've covered quite a bit today, taking a really deep dive into the fundamental principles and habits presented in these excerpts from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
We explored that critical shift from the superficial, quick-fix focus of the personality ethic to the foundational strength of the character ethic, understanding that character, who you are, communicates most eloquently.
We looked at the power of paradigms, how our internal maps shape our reality, and the profound insight that often the way we see the problem is the problem. We need to examine our maps.
We discussed the non-negotiable reality of natural, sequential growth, acknowledging that there are no shortcuts to true development in character and relationships. You have to respect the process.
And we introduced the transformative inside-out approach, starting with self, our paradigms, character, and motives as the necessary foundation for effective change and building strong, effective relationships.
We defined habits as the intersection of knowledge, skill, and desire, and saw how developing them moves us along the maturity continuum from dependence through independence, the private victories of habits 1, 2, 3, to effective interdependence, the public victories of habits 4, 5, 6.
And we unpacked those first 3 private victories. Be proactive, taking responsibility, focusing on our circle of influence, begin with the end in mind, becoming our own first creator, leading our lives with a clear vision and values, and put first things first. Disciplined execution based on principles and priorities, focusing on quadrant 2 activities and effective stewardship delegation.
We saw how public victory builds on that independent foundation, emphasizing the critical role of character and the emotional bank account in relationships. Trust is key.
And we explored the first 3 public victories. Think win-win, seeking mutual benefit from an abundance mentality, aiming for the third alternative. Seek first to understand, then to be understood, practicing deep, empathic listening before expressing ourselves. And synergize, valuing differences to create something new and better together.
Finally, we wrapped up with the habit of continuous self-renewal, habit 7. Sharpen the saw, across the 4 dimensions: physical, spiritual, mental, social, emotional, recognizing it as essential for maintaining effectiveness and fueling that upward spiral of growth.
These aren't just nice ideas floating around. They're challenging principles that require conscious effort, working on knowledge, skill, and desire, making and keeping commitments, moving forward step by step. It's definitely not a quick fix.
No.
But the source assures us the rewards are significant and begin to show immediately as you genuinely engage with the process.
Before we go, here's a thought to mull over, straight from the source. You are not your habits. You can replace old patterns of self-defeating behavior with new patterns if you decide to open your gate of change.
So, listener, where is your gate of change? What aspect of your life feels ready for a shift based on these principles? And what is one small, perhaps slightly uncomfortable commitment you could make to yourself today to begin opening that gate and starting that shift? Just one small step.
There is so much more depth to explore within this framework. We've only scratched the surface of concepts like really building trust through the emotional bank account, or unlocking the full power of the abundance mentality versus scarcity, or mastering the nuances of stewardship delegation.
Yeah, each habit could be its own deep dive, really. We'd love to know what resonated most with you in this discussion and where you'd like us to focus in future explorations of these powerful ideas. Let us know.
Until next time, keep diving deep.